Hello, in this broadcast, the program Time. Today, the Russian cosmonaut Vladimir Titov and the crew on board the American spaceship Discovery were launched into space. After the launch, however, it was learned that not all was in order on the ship.
3, 2, 1, and lift.
The liftoff of a spaceship is the inimitable spectacle of all times. It's marvelous, even if the craft is American. So they've again launched one. At one time it was that they, and we used to say that, the battle for success and superiority in space possibly continues. But this flight, the Russians and Americans are doing together. And we'll be concerned for and wish success not only to Vladimir Titov, but to his 5 American colleagues and the crew of the station Mir. They will meet in 4 days. The people at the space pad at Cape Canaveral are superstitious. The Colonel Vladimir Titov is considered to be lucky and a type of a guarantee for the success of the flight. This man lived through the unbelievable. He glanced into the eyes of death when, in 1983, during the launching of the Soyuz, fire broke out. Then he had to be catapulted. He encountered problems during the linkage with the station's Salyut 7. Then he had to return to Earth. They and we have experience, but maybe we have it together. As we learned, the launching weight of the Discovery today was 4 tons less than usual. This was to enable the ascent into the higher orbit of the station Mir. In the last information, one of the 44 engines of the shuttle failed. A second engine has problems, but again, there are 44 such engines on the shuttle, and here they feel that it will not affect its ability to maneuver around the station Mir. The launch of the shuttle spaceship Discovery was carefully followed in the Podmoskovian Flight Control Center as well. For Russian and American specialists, a complex, lengthy joint task began today. If this flight, according to the program STS-63, is completed successfully, in March on the Soyuz TM, together with 2 of our cosmonauts, departing for the station Mir will be a NASA astronaut as well. He should return to Earth after 3 months, but that time on the shuttle. From 1996 on, the Americans will fly to the Russian orbital complex only on shuttle spacecraft. But in order for all of this to happen, it's necessary to perfect the linkage system, and soon a dress rehearsal for that will be held. The shuttle will approach the Mir complex within a distance of 10 meters. Now, much is said about the danger of such an approach and the danger of subsequent linkage. What's your attitude? True, there are quite a few problems when any 2 such apparatus of such size approach each other. But I must say that the problem of safety is devoted great attention by us. And we have pre-calculated all possible and impossible scenarios. Therefore, I feel that we have attempted to foresee everything. The approach must occur the 6th of February, and the program Time intends to report the event live on the air. And now, about an immediate Russian problem, the Chechen crisis. According to information agencies, the Russian military had managed to cross the river Sunja and seize the Plattstorm on the right bank of the river within Grozny parameters. The press service of the government reports that during street clashes in Grozny, unlawful militarized groups sustained heavy losses but continued to hold on to parameters and strongholds of defense on the right bank of the Sunja River. Under their cover, the exodus of the main forces from the capital in the south and southeasterly directions continues, where bases for partisan movement are being set up. Today, the following news appeared as well. Dudayev emissaries are sending Chechen children into combat, exploiting religious sentiments and Muslim rituals. As a correspondent of Tass was told today, fighting against the federal forces in Chechnya are armed adolescents from the ages of 12 to 14. In this connection, it's not at all rhetorical, the question of the commanders. What should a Russian soldier do when he's accosted by a child with a grenade launcher in his hands? The Chechen war undoubtedly has its own specifics, and today, for the first time after a lengthy break, again the words were said about constructive cooperation with the forces of the Chechen opposition resisting the Dudayev regime. These words were said by the head of the Territorial Department of Regional Organs of Executive Power on the Chechen Republic, Nikolai Semyonov, who arrived in Mozdok. Today, the decisions of the session of the European Council became known regarding Russia. The Parliamentary Assembly of the European Council has suspended the process of Russia's entry into this organization, but did not close the doors before it. The European Council will return to examining the Russian demand as soon as a peaceful process is defined in resolving the Chechen problem. One can't apply brakes to Russia's entry into the European Council, said the Deputy Chairman of the Federative Council of the Federal Assembly, Ramazan Abdullah Tipov. If today Russia were a member of that organization, there would be levers to prevent the current situation. Therefore, now now not emotions, but joint efforts are needed, Abdulaptipov emphasized. And as previously of concern is the situation in regions neighboring with Chechnya, it's complicated further by the number of refugees who have been sent there. Just during the last day in the Territorial Immigration Service of regions of Russia adjacent to Chechnya, 5,816 refugees have appealed from the conflict zone. Our film crew returned from the Khasavyurt region, where the administrative border between Dagestan and Chechnya runs. On the blown-up Gerzelsk bridge, local Chechen residents appear and intend, through their efforts, to restore destruction. We've heard here on the border how the mullah calls for prayer and the rooster crows. Does that mean on the border everything is calm and peaceful? We heard no shots. Here the situation is stable. To say that there's some sort of crossfire or rivalry between the two villages located on the border between Dagestan and on the Chechen side of the border, there were not such complications here, and I think in the future they should not be. Here they feel that the military conflict will soon end, and one must take concern for regular life now. In the Khasavyurt region, there are 50,000 refugees. That's apart from their own 110,000 residents. Roofs and food were somewhat provided, but there's no work. Raisa Kakajanova, a teacher from Grozny, is among the refugees. Here is her sister. Neither tomorrow nor the day after will they be able to return to their destroyed city. They would love to work here in Khasavyurt, but regional and local authorities are overwhelmed. There's no work even for their own locals. And if the problem is not solved immediately, then everything could lead to social upheaval. Unlike other Cossack villages of Stavropolye, Suzhenskaya's existence is obscure. The first Cossacks appeared here 3 years ago. They were refugees from the Suzhensky region of Chechnya-Ingushetia. That was when television never spoke about the violations of human rights. Even then, these rights were abused, and then our Russian people, our Cossacks and fathers, ran here and lived in these most difficult conditions as they still do. The war which began brought fierce lateral troop movement. On the banks of the Sunja, not one Cossack remains, and here, where basically Chechens lived, there are only 2 Chechen families. Incidentally, the Cossacks assert that no one forced them out, they left themselves. How do you feel among the Russian people here in the Stavropolye area? Well, I can't tell you about others, but for myself I can say I work among them, and I feel very comfortable. No one offends me, either in my workplace or on a human level or morally or materially. The majority does not hope any longer to return to their own homes, possibly destroyed by others or bombed by their own people. Do you want to go home? Yes. And where is your home? In Grozny. And why did you and your mother leave Grozny? Because there's a war there. Do you think you'll return home? I don't know. Continually subjected to danger are journalists. In Grozny, the television journalist, the director of the independent television studio, Sergei Gavarukhin, the son of the famous film director Stanislav Gavarukhin, his condition, according to the medics, is moderate. And again, very serious reproaches were made against the command of the Russian forces in Grozny by soldiers' mothers. The exchange of prisoners of war is not occurring. The meeting of the panel of the Ministry of Defense of Russia today occurred in Moscow without the Minister of Defense, Pavel Grachov, who is, as previously, in hospital under the health center system. At this time, the Prime Minister Viktor Chernomyrdin, together with the Secretary of the Security Council, Oleg Globov, is conducting, on the instructions of the President of Russia, an extended conference dedicated to questions of military reform. And one more report from Moscow from the Ministry of Healthcare. Today in Moscow, a press conference was held at which the Minister of Healthcare and the Medical Industry, Eduard Nechayev, talked about the organization of medical aid for the civil population of Chechnya. What was not said at the press conference? In Grozny, near the stadium, in the building of the former 4th City Hospital, doctors have begun to work. Chechen specialists, as the minimum of medications permits them, and the military shared with them, and the minimum of warmth and water, treat all who come in. Hospital of Medical Catastrophes. The minister told the press about it. With the best Moscow surgical and emergency brigades employed. In Tostoyurt, Znamenskaya, Pervomayskaya, Mostok, 5,500 people were aided. Of no no less concerned than the injured are epidemics for the doctors today. Cholera was mentioned. Its outburst in spring is obviously unavoidable. On the territory of Chechnya, 3 natural centers of plague outburst exist. And new information: shells have destroyed burial vaults for animals which died from malignant anthrax. The absence of water and sewage make the situation threatening. There's a lot of work in Grozny, isn't there? In the near future, and even today they have to do it. There is a lot of work, and I wouldn't say not just much, but very much. And they will have to attract and seek out people, find buildings, distribute equipment, and supply them with the necessary means for their work. And moreover, they'll have to be backed up by anti-plague brigades and other systems of our government Committee of Sanitary Epidemic Control. And one more bit of news received in the press center of the Ministry of Defense in Mozdok. In the area of Chernyrechye, Dudaev supporters have planted a highly explosive, powerful bomb, and if it's detonated, Grozny will completely lose its water supply. But life, despite everything, continues. Recently in Grozny, for the first time during the time of conflict, a child was born. She was delivered in the military hospital. The girl was called Zhenya. Together with her mother, she has been evacuated from Grozny. A group of Chechen leaders who are against Dudaev and supported by Moscow issued a statement in Znamensky in which they indicate that the new government of national rebirth will begin to fulfill its responsibilities by the end of February. An inexorable part of the landscape of Chechnya are, of course, the oil wells. Oil here is the basis of the economy, but in the last 3 years, the sector has been brought to a complete collapse. Of the 4 oil drilling vaults, only Karagorskaya has kept its equipment, people, and is capable of work. Although even here, the staff is without salary for almost a year. People live through gardens and farmers' markets. The Ministry of Fuel and Energy has prepared a plan to restore the oil industry in Chechnya. In the opinion of experts, the majority of oil sites will have to be started from scratch because equipment has not been replaced for many years. One could say the same about the oil pipelines and refining plants, especially since a significant number of them were severely damaged during combat. Restoration work will be conducted in several levels. In the first phase, the oil sector will supply the internal demand of Chechnya itself. After completing a full-scale reconstruction, the Republic will be able to share its oil goods with neighboring republics and later will produce oil for export. Its yield by then is planned to be at a level of 4 million tons. Experts have calculated that to restore the oil sector of Chechnya, at least 1,200 billion rubles will be needed. From informed sources, often reports leaked out about the fact that Chechen oil and the controlled weapons market are the main reasons for the separatism in Chechnya and are at the base of today's Chechen conflict. But the battle for oil and, hence, power is accelerating. News of oil scandals surfaces in the press. However, to get to the truth in these stories is extremely difficult. Around the trade of Russian oil scandals erupt more and more frequently. Recently, mass media reported about the operations of a commercial firm which unexpectedly received from the government the right to export 8 million tons of oil in exchange for credits for the Krasnoyarsk combine plant. As the newspaper Izvestia reported, the businessmen will buy oil at domestic Russian prices but sell it to the Americans at world prices, 4 times more expensive. The Krasnoyarsk combine plant, as a result of the deal, will get an interest-free credit of $150 million to produce new combine models. Sources of mass media accused organizers of the deal of corruption. The director of the Krasnoyarsk plant, Lev Loginov, attempted to absolve himself of guilt. $150 million is a credit or loan provided to the Krasnoyarsk Joint Stock Company in accordance with the instructions of the government. And the oil, 8 million tons, is sold at international prices, and the government will receive everything completely if you carefully read the instructions of the government. That is, according to Loginov, oil will be bought from the government and sold abroad at world prices. Lev Loginov stated that in organizing this transaction, he was following instructions from the president and the government. If complying with instructions of the president and the government is called corruption, I've always felt that that was discipline. The dollar today rose by another 36 points. Inflation in January has reached record indicators of the last 12 months, 17.8% per month. And in the economic chronicle of the day, the most important news is about the miners' strikes. For the third day, the coal workers of the association, Rostov Coal, are in a walkout demanding salary delayed from November and other monetary payments. At a standstill are not only coal mining and processing plants, even nurseries and coal mining villages have closed down. Miners, as previously, are insisting on the visit to Rostov by the 3rd of February, that is, as of today, of a state commission headed by the first vice premier, Anatoly Chubaits. But, as we already know, he didn't arrive, and they say this: we're waiting for the last day after which political demands will be submitted. So the union leaders warned. They have in mind the demand for the resignation of the president and government. A very harsh address to the president from Vorkuta miners today. The text: the miners of Vorkuta had done everything for you to become president of Russia. You've betrayed and deceived us, and we're plummeting into an abyss of war, poverty, and crime. The Vorkuta coal workers will hold a 24-hour strike the 6th of February, and as of today, 29 out of 30 territorial committees of the Russian unions of the coal industry, uniting overall around 600,000 miners, announced their intention to participate in the 24-hour warning strike the 8th of February. But possibly they will be satisfied with the schedule for paying the debts to the coal workers for the first quarter of this year, which should be prepared by tomorrow. During the time of perestroika, not one miners' strike has turned into a major political action capable of shaking the government. As of today, the miners' strikes can provide a new platform for the increasing political battles. In Moscow today, for example, those met who 5 years ago were some of the central figures of the democratic platform of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Yeltsin and Popov, Afanasyev and Sobchak, Trovkin and Burbulis, all these prominent political figures grew out of the overcoat of the democratic platform of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. However, today's conference dedicated to the 5th anniversary of the democratic platform was not an evening of nostalgic memories for participants, saying that the democratic platform could have become the largest party in the country if the leadership of the then Communist Party of the Soviet Union didn't vacillate in its views from Kilkhachev to Gorbachev. Orators today discussed more the current distribution of political powers. Gavril Popov said he sees 3 influential groups. He says communists, judging from the 3rd Congress, have learned nothing, Zhirinovsky supporters, and radical Westerners, reformers around Gaidar. In the opinion of Popov, the Democrats today should seek allies to create an anti-bureaucratic front in the country. Gennady Burbulis feels that they must stop moaning over the ability of the Democrats to unite, because today there is no need for heated demonstrations, and professional pragmatics must emerge on the political scene. Yuri Afanasyev feels that the Democrats have ideas, thoughts, and senses, but they're not turning into an all-encompassing force. No matter what, today we owe the democratic platform to awaken democratic awareness and the factual collapse of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Today in Moscow, the second pan-Russian conference ended, and all the attention of the press was fixed not so much on the conference but on the scandal with the appearance on the first day of the Congress of the Communist leaders and the irreconcilable opposition. At today's press conference, the organizers of the Sabor explained the first meeting was open and everyone could attend, which caused confusion among many journalists. Some of the Sabor's participants assessed these reports of the press as a consciously fired torpedo, to which the Metropolitan Cyril, member of the Presidium of the Sabor, said if it was a torpedo, it was weak. If one speaks of the opposition, then the Sabor is of course an oppositional phenomenon, but this is a different type of opposition. Its aim, according to its participants, is not to replace the current power, but to help it out of the crisis. We, participants of the Sabor, are convinced that all the woes which plague our nation are symptoms of one illness, the moral degradation of human individuality. The reason for that is the loss of spirituality based on orthodoxy. It says in the appeal of the Sabor to the Russian people, a Russian Sabor, an appeal to the Russian people. Some interpret this as a manifestation of nationalism. Is it so? When you simply love your country and you love your roots and are attempting to help and to be nurtured by them, what kind of nationalism is this? It's called patriotism. On the backdrop of the continuing years of political strife, the Sabor, if not one of the first, then one of the most significant attempts at unification. The Russian Sabor, I think, is obliged to generate and bring to light those ideas which would be absorbed by the broadest spectrum of our society. Today, the Supreme Court of Russia declined the protest of the Prosecutor General of Russia against the acquittal passed by the military panel of the Supreme Court on the former Deputy Minister of Defense of the USSR, Valentin Varenikov. That is, he has been found not guilty of betrayal of the homeland. I'll remind you, Varenikov is the only of the accused in the Government Commission of Emergency Situations case, the top officials of the former Soviet Union who refused political amnesty and faced the court. This information seems to summarize the past and today. In each republic of the former USSR, they have their own rights and lefts, their own political battles. And yet, more active and realistic is the process of integration. Today, the Speaker of the Russian Parliament is in Minsk. At the meeting between Ivan Rybkin with the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, the discussion touched on the imminent visit to Minsk on the 21st and 22nd of February of the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, and the signing by the heads of states of a large political agreement on friendship and cooperation. Alexander Lukashenko also stated that he intends to initiate a national referendum to be held in the Republic, at which one of the paramount questions will be that of integration with Russia. I predict more than 90% of the population will unanimously support fraternal contacts and the integration of and closer ties between the two greater nations, and I'm convinced of this. And we must and are obliged to facilitate interaction between our individual nations to the benefit of our people. One must note that today in Russia the urgent session of the Federative Council was not held because there was no quorum. But the press, of course, did not know this beforehand, therefore television cameras were on site. Yesterday, many information agencies, citing in ITAR-TASS, said that during a visit to the Kaliningrad district, Vladimir Shumeyka announced his intention to submit his candidacy to run in the coming presidential elections. Yesterday, this report was dismissed. The chairman's words were not correctly interpreted. The answer to the question about his participation in the presidential campaign never existed and was never raised. We received a report that the investigation of the criminal case in the murder of the deputy of the State Duma, Sergei Skorochkin, is already under the control of Boris Yeltsin. Vladimir Zhirinovsky, in view of the murder of Sergei Skorochkin, said that at the session of the State Duma on the 8th of February, the Liberal Democrats will raise the question about the resignation of either the Speaker of the Chamber, Ivan Rybkin, or the Minister of Internal Affairs of Russia, Viktor Yerin. The news of the murder near Moscow of the deputy of the Duma, Sergei Skorochkin, evidently forced the deputies and entrepreneurs to think of tightening measures for their personal safety. Heads of the Parliamentary Security Committee to place this matter under special control. And here is the reason. During 3 years, among the Congress of the National Deputies, not one of them was killed by the hands of criminals. Here, during the course of 1 year, 3 deputies have been killed. Remembering old days, Viktor Mironov nevertheless understands that, in his opinion, the last events are of a clearly criminal nature. There is basis to presume, and probably this is so, that the murder of Sergei Grigorievich Skorochkin has no relation to so-called political murders. Yet Viktor Mironov feels that the investigation of the murder of the deputy will be brought to a wise conclusion because the progress is already controlled by the President, the Minister of Internal Affairs, and the State Duma Security Council. In the Duma corridors, they related that after Sergei Skorochkin, in the opinion of certain people in the know, in self-defense, shot 2 people, sold his property, and fled abroad. In the opinion of the deputy, who wished to remain anonymous, Skorochkin should not have returned from England. From Simferopol today, news about an explosion which occurred in the center of the city. Last night, a most powerful explosion rang out in the center of Simferopol. Damaged most was the supermarket Via Laki. This is the joint Ukrainian-German company. Windows were blown out in neighboring homes, but fortunately there were no human injuries. It's assumed that the criminal left the explosive device on a windowsill. It's so simply done these days. Incidentally, such explosions and automatic rounds occur in the middle of the day, not only in Simferopol, but in Sevastopol and in Yalta. One of its rivals, the Crimean Mafia, shot in Kiev upon entering the plane. They say that he had promised to sell his company, but later to avenge himself. An open war is underway between mafia groups for property and power, and this is the true reason. And militia are left dealing only with investigations, and even if it manages to catch the criminals, often they manage to wriggle out, and therefore the settling of accounts continues. On the border between Lithuania and Belarus, at the customs point, a truck was detained belonging to a resident of the Lithuanian town Plugi, Alvydas Zalackis. Upon inspection with the Geiger counter within the vehicle, 3,600 microrengens per hour were recorded on the outside between 800 to 1,000. In the exclosed chamber, 2 tons of radioactive material was found. According to the driver, it was loaded in a forest near Bryansk. 2 residents of Plunga were arrested who were expecting the contraband vehicle at the border point. After discussions in various instances, the Ministry of Environmental Protection of the Republic gave permission for transportation of dangerous cargo from stockpiles of radioactive waste of the Ignalinsk nuclear power station. A similar cargo was detained recently at the border post at the international seaport in Klaipėda. The sender of the latter is one of the firms of the city Kaliningrad. These facts are evidence of the fact that more frequently passing through Lithuania are radioactive cargoes from Russia. We also received a report today from the Federal Service of Counterintelligence that in 1994 in Murmansk, a ship of the Riga Automotive shipyards was detained in an attempt of smuggling 127 tons of copper and 4,000 tons of nickel. Since the beginning of the current year, there is a pronounced increase among criminal groups in delivering firearms from Estonia into Russia, although they say criminals have no nationalities. In Israel, thieves of ancient manuscripts from the Russian National Library were arrested. 6 citizens of that country are direct thieves of the manuscripts from the Russian National Library. This was reported today at a press conference in St. Petersburg by the head of the department investigating organized criminal activity within the City Department of St. Petersburg and District, Anatoly Alennikov. As you know, suspected of involvement in the crime is the famous attorney Dmitry Yakubovsky, who was arrested. Alennikov confirmed that 2 of the thieves previously were employees of the library. He very highly praised the work of Israeli police, however, could not say whether the arrested Israelis would be handed over to the Russian law enforcement organs. This information was reported by Interfax. In Cairo, the four-sided summit between the heads of England, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian autonomy ended. The peace process in the Middle East regularization is a historical need and serves the interests of all the people of the region, it says in the statement adopted at the summit. The sides, it says in it further, state their decisiveness to further discussions whose final goal is to achieve a firm, just peace in the Middle East and also confirm their adherence to the letter and spirit of the previously signed agreements between Israel and the PLO and Jordan. They express hope for the signing in the near future of similar agreements between the Israeli state on one side and Syria and Lebanon on the other. Participants of the meeting, which lasted for 5 hours, condemned the outburst of violence in the region and announced their decisiveness to use force to curb all manifestations of terrorism. In the interests of entrenching peace and stability and economic flourishing of the Middle Eastern nations, they agreed through joint efforts to reduce the presence of weapons there and to turn the area into an area free from all weapons of mass destruction. The side spoke out for developing economic cooperation, developing joint projects, and specifically to found a Middle Eastern Bank of Development. One can only hope that the aims outlined at the summit are realistic and won't be interrupted, as has happened often in the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict. And noteworthy also is the fact that the plan for the near future in Washington is the meeting of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of Egypt, Jordan, Israel, and the Palestinian autonomy with the American Secretary of State, Christopher. It turns out that even this time they are in no hurry to use the mediation of Moscow, which we will note played and continues to play far from the last role in expediting the Arab-Israeli dialogue. Tombs of soldiers of the Soviet army were desecrated in the central cemetery Shchetsina. This is not the first time in Poland and a crisis of power. I won't shoot, if only because I'm a laureate for the Nobel Peace Prize, assures the president of Poland, Lech Walesa, after announcing his intention to suspend the parliament. Meanwhile, since morning today, the planned work continued in the parliament, accused by the head of the state of inability to control the situation, while half of the members of the government, in the opinion of the president, should resign. Both chambers are unanimous in their opinion that the very intention to suspend the Legislative Assembly is a violation of the Constitution, and with all ensuing repercussions for the president. This point of view is shared even by activists of the party who seceded from Solidarity, who spent time in power and now are in the parliamentary opposition. Advisors of Lech Walesa during the battle with the former regime attempted to convince the president that it's not appropriate for a man who calls himself himself the biggest democrat in this part of the globe, to embark on an anti-democratic path. He was left with his own opinion. The president often expressed dissatisfaction with the performance of the government of Valdemar Pavlik. It was created by a coalition in which the leading role was played by the Social Democrats, the former communists. This is probably the essence of the conflict. Lech Walesa intends again to make a last decisive stand against his traditional opponents who have returned to power through a democratic path. And now, on the eve of presidential elections, in which today he has no chance to win, however, in the current tussle, the Polish society is two-thirds against him. The situation on the border between Peru and Ecuador has again escalated. Ecuador has laid responsibility for the combat on the command of the Peruvian army. Since the end of last week, only on the disputed stretch of the border near the river Senala, more than 60 people have died and more than 100 Ecuadorian and Peruvian soldiers were injured. The last few days, the attention of the world press, as again, is directed to the Lockerbie affair. I'll remind you that a plane was blown up in 1988 over the Scottish town Lockerbie, belonging to the American company Pan American, when 270 people died. During the investigation of that case, it was established that involved in it were 2 Libyan terrorists. After Libya's refusal to submit to the demands of the United States, Great Britain, and France to extradite the accused, in the beginning of 1992, international sanctions were levied against it. All plane contact with Tripoli was ceased. As a result of the air blockade, Jamahiriya sustains great losses. And quite unexpectedly, 2 new facts have surfaced, citing a secret report of the American CIA. In Western mass media, reports appeared of an Iranian trail in the Lockerbie case. According to the version of the American intelligence, blame for the tragedies carried not by Libya, but Iran. The immediate perpetrators of the terrorist act, as is asserted in the publications, were Palestinian gunmen who received from a certain Iranian diplomat $10 million. The League of Arab Nations has demanded that the United Nations re-examine the Lockerbie case. The UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali offered Libya to submit to the Security Council an official request to remove international sanctions. But for this, weighty proof is needed, which evidently does not exist yet. On their part, the Iranian authorities naturally deny all allegations against them. In the cultural news, there's one item of great interest. More than 50 church and secular choirs from various countries of the world are participating in the International Festival of Orthodox Music. It opened today with a concert in the columnar hall of the House of Unions. Currently, our children love satanic dances and songs, and that's the source of all evil, because on which soil the plant stands, that is the fruit it will bear. These words were said by the luminary St. John Chrysostom in ancient days, and Chasad they apply to our current days, so as to somewhat enrich the soil of spirituality in Russia. For the 7th time, the Moscow International Festival of Orthodox Music is held. Its today's opening is an opportunity during the month of February in the columnar hall in the Rachmaninoff Auditorium of the Conservatory to hear music heard in Orthodox cathedrals, fragments of liturgies and vigils, spiritual poems and carols, that music which has been heard over centuries and was heard by hundreds of thousands of people. This festival gathered not only church and monastery, but secular choirs, which is joyous because such a festival risks becoming an occasion for a narrow circle of specialists. 70 years of the battle with the opium for the people were not in vain. Although, just from the faces in the columnar hall, it's clear Orthodox music is listened by the most various people. This is the basic news of the day, except for sports, which will be reported to you by Daria Chervonenko. With this, I bid you farewell. All the best. Thanks for your attention. Good evening. A sensation occurred at the European Figure Skating Championships in Dortmund. The winner is the 17-year-old Ilya Kulik from suburban Moscow, trained by Viktor Kudryavtsev. During the last 50 years, this is the second case in the history of figure skating when a debutante wins the gold medal. And best in the freestyle program was the Olympic champion Alexei Urmanov from St. Petersburg. He made 8 triple lutzes and received all the highest marks for artistic performance. But the 6th result after the brief program performance didn't allow him into first place. In the end, he has silver. The bronze goes to Vyacheslav Zagrodnyuk, the Ukrainian representative. The Russian Olga Markova is the leader after performing the brief program. In the second position is the four-time European champion, the French Surya Bonali, and in third place is Maria Butyrskaya, also representative of Russia. Today, 6 matches were played in the International Hockey League tournaments. I'll note the men. Once the Torpedoes from Nizhny Novgorod beat the leaders, the Wings of the Soviets 2-1, Spartak Sokol tied 2-2. The Moscow Army team today hosted the Torpedoes from Yaroslavl. In the first period, the goal was scored by Alexander Asachi. The Army team had an advantage in numbers. About how events developed, you can learn from our evening report on television channel Ostankino at midnight. The regular matches occurred in the NHL, and not some of them. The New Jersey Devils won 5-4 against the Quebec Nordiques. 2 successful passes were made by Alexander Simak. The Stanley Cup holder, the New York Rangers, have lost a point at home. The match with Tampa Bay Lightning ended in a tie 3-3. Sergei Zubov and Sergei Nechimov each had a successful pass, and Alexei Kovalov scored. In Moscow, in Krylatsky, the third international snow festival started. It will continue until the 5th of February. Today, the bobsled racers from Ufa, Urengoy, Moscow, and Helsinki competed. The winners was the Finn Palik Pipolo. In second place, Rudolf Ansel from Urengoy. Good evening. Again, cyclones have become more active over the North Atlantic. They will bring warm air into the northern and western parts of the European part of Russia, into the Baltic region and Belarus. On all this territory, in the zone of a cyclone and atmospheric fronts, the weather will be unpleasant. Wet snow, rain, blizzards, and strong gusty winds. Temperatures in the Baltic countries, in Belarus and the northwestern area, from -2 to +3 degrees. On Sunday, it will be cool, down to -7. In Murmansk, the Arkhangelsk district, the Republic of Komi, and the Volgodsk region, -5 to 10 degrees. In the central and central Chernozem region and in Ukraine. On Saturday, partly cloudy skies. On Sunday, the clouds will thicken. In the majority of areas, snow with mixed rain will fall. The roads will be icy. Temperatures during the day from 0 to -5. In Moldova, under the influence of an anticyclone, it will be variably cloudy, without much precipitation, day temperatures around 0. In the Rostov area, over the central and lower Volga area, in the zone of a cold atmospheric front, partly cloudy skies, snow mixed with rain, temperatures during the day -1 +4. In the Stavropol Rim area and the Krasnodar Rim in the Chechen Republic and Dagestan, in the morning fog, during the day cloudy, with periods of rain. In the mountains, snow with rain, with icy roads, temperatures from 0 to +5. On the Black Sea coast of the Krasnodar Rim area, cloudy skies, temperatures around Sochi +6 to 8. Beyond the Caucasus, cloudy skies from 0 to +5. In Azerbaijan, rain +2 to 7 degrees. About the weather in St. Petersburg and Moscow. In Petersburg, cloudy with periods of snow mixed with rain. Winds are southwest gusty. Temperatures at night -3 to 5. During the day, +1 to 3. In Moscow, partly cloudy skies. In the afternoon, there will be some snow. Winds are from the southwest, 7 to 10 meters per second. Temperatures at night -8 to 10. Throughout the suburbs, down to -13. During the day, -2 to 4, with icy roads. The forecast was prepared according to the data of the Oceanic Meteorological Center of Russia. I wish you a good disposition on the weekend. Until we meet again.